Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live stream. All right. So today is going to be a continuation of the series that we started a little while ago. We're going to continue to work on the fantasy animation short project. And with me, once again, I have to fake look to that side, is JK Riki. Hello.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another live stream. It's good to have both of us here again. It's always a joy to work together, and looking forward to continuing the short.
Yes.
As usual, feel free to chat, and we'll keep an eye over there while we're working. And one of us will always be poking around the chat and looking at that stuff. If you missed some of the previous entries into this foray that we're working on, it will be linked to in the description of the recording of this live stream. So you could just click over there and see all the details and all the exciting character development stuff. And I believe today we're working on storyboards and animatic, right?
Yes, indeed. That doesn't mean that the character design that we started in the earlier sessions is over yet. Far from it. But, we wanted to continue with a little bit of a different side of this project. And in a professional environment, you would also have like different teams working on different stuff at the same time. But, in this case, it's at the moment just us working on everything for this project. We can also have a look at this was the board that we started with that has like some of the character concepts and some of the lovely character designs that we already found, like this wonderful sheep that we're definitely going to have in today's animatic. And and the other thing that we have hi user 98, nice to have you here today. The other main ingredient that we have that will guide our animatic process is, of course, a script. Now, there are some productions that actually write while storyboarding. I think there are shows like Steven Universe or Adventure Time where oftentimes they did not have a script at first and they just started storyboarding and see where they ended up with. But yeah, I don't know. In this case, I felt like I wanted a very specific way of how these things, how the scene progresses and how the scene feels at what point in it. So this is why I felt more confident by writing a script first. And in one of the previous live streams, I also did a readout of this script. I'm not going to do that again for a while, but if you want to hear me reading out the script, you can find that in the very first live stream that we did about this project. And we're not going to start at the very beginning of the script. We picked a chunk of it that we feel like is more realistic for us to finish in a reasonable time. So we're gonna start. Where is it? We're gonna start here, right? Where our main character Mila, a young mage, turns around. She was on the field plucking turnips from the turnip sheep, and she turns around and sees that a goblin is trying to steal all the turnips that she's harvested, or a bunch of them, and wants to stop him. So I'm gonna jump into Open Tunes for this, but you don't have I always get asked for what is the best software for storyboarding and for doing animatics and stuff like that. And my recommendation, there is specialized storyboarding software, both free and paid. There is from Toon Boom, there's Storyboarder, which is, I think, very and it does have a couple cool things, the the thing with like storyboards, there are some things that you want to do very quickly, and I think so. If I do a shape here at the side, you see that it is transparent, like it is not filled at the moment. And Toon Boom Storyboarder has a very handy function where it would automatically fill all of these things, so you can put stuff very easily on layers and move that around. And that's that little bit of extra functionality that you get from paid software that is specialized on storyboarding. But personally, any animation software I feel like will do for storyboarding, because all what you need in the end basically is a sequence of drawings. You need storyboard image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So the timeline of an animation software is perfect for that. And you can have layers and all this stuff in your favorite animation software. So my recommendation is always just do it. If you already have a 2D animation software that just do your storyboards in there.
And then I would chime in and say, back in the
Yeah.
million years ago when I learned, we did it on index cards. Literally, we didn't even use software. We did our storyboards on blank index cards, and then we put them with tape up on the wall. And I know, Ferdinand, you have a old Animator Island article about using sticky notes in a similar way, right? So don't think that you have to necessarily use digital tools, especially early on, because you're going to be swapping stuff around so much. And there's something, a lot of people really like working traditionally. So feel free to do that too, if it suits you, and you can always import stuff later.
That's a very good point. I'm so stuck in the digital tools by
now.
now.
Me too. At this point, I mean, it's just so much easier. So it makes sense to do it digitally. But I just wanted to make that note that there's always that possibility, especially if you're stuck. I think that can be really useful. If you get stuck, just pull out a piece of paper and do some scribbles on that. See if it changes your mindset a little bit, because it can a little bit. Anyway, just something to chime in on. Over in the chat, Dylan says hi. Hey, Dylan, good to see you as usual. Hey. And then user 9T8 says, what do you think? Which animation is more time-taking, Disney style or anime? Which is a very interesting question. We could probably chat about as we get started.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit later, because I just wanted to start mentioning what the very first two things that I'll be doing, or what you could be doing when you are storyboarding and animating could be. There are two things that I want to specifically mention, because I feel like people often don't do that. And I had to learn to do it, and I have to sometimes force myself to not forget about it. So the two things that I would suggest is, first of all, draw a rough top-down map of the environment that you're storyboarding in. It helps you to make the whole scene a lot more coherent. Like in this case, we don't have an interior room, but the way how you set up a room, for example, can really change the kind of images that you can get out of it. Like, I don't know, maybe you are in a very you are like in the throne room of a king or something like that, and that will change a lot by where is the throne, is there like windows behind the throne and stuff like that, and is the throne on top of like a tall staircase or something like that. Those are things that will totally change your camera angles, and your, like, if the king is up here talking down to the servants down there all the way at the end of a long staircase, that will give you completely different pictures than them being at the same level. So what I like to do is to think about, what is that room that this takes place in, because it can inform how the scene is being set up in the camera. And in our case, we are outdoors, and there's like farmland area where the sheep are in, and I could imagine, because of the goblins there, that the fence is relatively tall. So I think, because of the danger that goblins could just walk in, I think they don't have like these like small fences there. I don't think it's something like this. I think it's more like these tall just logs put up in a way that you can't really climb on them, and you can't jump over them. And then I was also thinking, and JK, if you have any ideas or input, let me know at any point, because we didn't actually really talk about this yet.
It's true. That's a really good insight, though, because I hadn't really thought about. I mean, in my head, it was just standard farmland, but you do need to worry about the goblins. I think the thing that initially jumps forward to me is the solid walls would be extraordinarily expensive, and so much resource use just to get that sort of thing. So we might have to come up with a creative way, even if it's like every other log, right? And there's just kind of almost bars in between, so it's more like a cage. It's one of those little things, right? Like, oh, we're doing an animation, it's fantasy, we can just do whatever. But if you have that element of realism and you think about, okay, this is a farm, like they can't just do whatever and make it work. But if you had something, more like that, or even you have like the little gaps in between or something that like the goblins can't get their heads through. I think that not only gives it some more visual interest, but also it lends itself to that real world aspect where, if fences break, that's a big deal. It's not like, you just go put up one new board. You have to really reconstruct a lot of stuff. And resource management on a farm is really important, because it's not like you have high profit margins. And, so you have to keep that stuff in mind.
I really like that. We definitely need to write that down. In our board here, I have this section where we just write down notes for different aspects of the world and different characters. And I think this would be a new category. We need like a farmland category, and then write down what we just had there, like tall fences because of the goblins. And I would always recommend to write stuff like this down, because you will forget stuff like that. Even if you feel like, oh, this is so important for the world. Sometimes I flip through my notes and I'm already like, oh, we already talked about this. We already had some ideas for this. Okay. So yeah.
Especially if you're building your own world, because you have to keep track of all of it. Like it's not, and little inconsistencies may not seem like a big deal until you release it to the world, and then they're like suddenly a Reddit thread where it's like, there's all the problems with this short. So it's good to keep track of all this stuff and figure that out.
Okay. Just writing that down. And I do think that the area is probably relatively large. At least that's how I pictured it. Like, I didn't picture it as like just like this small kind of thing, and then there's just like a couple sheep in there. But right. I thought it could be more like, and maybe go along with like the landscape a little bit, so that they have like, I don't know how many sheep that would be, but that they can bunch up in places and notably go from one side to another during the whole scene.
Right. The other thing, I guess, to keep in mind would be the pen area versus like more of a meadow kind of thing, because you're not going to be able to surround a meadow with the tall walls or any fences. Really, it's very hard to get that amount of material. So you're going to have a slightly smaller area for when the sheep are either being harvested, I guess, or
Yeah.
or when they're coming in for the night or things like that, versus kind of going out to graze where you would be shepherding them a little bit more, and then you'd have to be which brings up an interesting idea of like farm animals, because usually with sheep you have sheepdogs, right? So are we going to have anything like that? Is that another element that we need to think about? Could go either way.
Yeah, right now we don't have a sheepdog at all, but I think, yeah, that would probably be.
And we don't have to, but that's something, again, as we continue to explore, we're going to keep coming across these things like, oh, right, we should think about that.
Uh-huh. All right. Yeah, definitely.
Because even a sheepdog, that's another level of defense, which means now your fences don't have to be quite as extreme because you have this protector almost alerting you to the presence of bad things. And then in this scene, we'd also, if we do that, we'd have to keep in mind there would need to be a reason the sheepdog's not there, which we wouldn't necessarily have to say because it's a little short, but we have to think about that aspect. So whether the sheepdog is off in the fields with the other sheep, and the dad, and they're already occupied, and you think, oh, well, the goblins wouldn't dare attack the farm in the middle of the day or whatever. I don't know, but that's something interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracting you from the planning of the farm.
Yeah, no, it's. I think it's already. I think it's going to be a lot more realistic. So maybe we have like this very small area that has like this tall fence, and then maybe you just have like these very small fences that do like some kind of a bigger area. And she would be here in this smaller area.
And if you're gonna have a barn or something, because I think in the scene don't the sheep like runs up the wall, or I guess it could be the fence wall too.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have a barn, it would probably be attached to the high security area so that the sheep can go outside at night and stuff like that. Which would also add some visual element interest. I think we never really talked about it, but if the goblins typically were to attack or steal the sheep at night, then this would kind of make a lot of sense, because you could usher the sheep into the protected area in the evenings, and then in the daytime they come out into the main area. And since this scene is set during the day, it could be almost unusual that the goblin is there, which also plays into this particular goblin, right? Because we talked about this goblin maybe being like a continual antagonist that's weird. Like this goblin is gonna maybe wear something and want to be a little bit more individualistic. So in a sense, which I really kind of like now that I'm saying it out loud, you have Mila, who is a character who thinks a little more outside the box, and then you have this particular goblin, yet to be named, that also maybe thinks outside the box. So like this goblin maybe thinks, hey, how come we don't ever raid them during the day when they're not even protecting their sheep? And all the other goblins are like, we don't do things like that. What's wrong with you? So that could play back and forth pretty nicely.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, yeah. I think that already like gives us an idea. And I think like maybe there's like a road not too far off. Just like a dirt farm road. And I think the goblin is escaping like in this direction.
Okay.
And then so here, this area will probably have very little grass and like dried mud, mostly because all the grass is eaten. And this area would have a little bit taller grass, but also spots that are just all eaten. And then maybe outside we have the taller grass growing again.
And then where the arrow is that where the forest will be, or how far away is the forest from the farm in your mind?
In my mind, I think it's in the distance. Like you could
Okay.
see like the hills coming up and maybe like forest in the distance. So there's still a lot of grasslands.
Grassland. Okay, sounds good. That makes sense because then it's harder for them to just get into the place. And
All
then in
right.
terms of like the fields where the like they would take the sheep with the sheepdog and stuff like that, would we think maybe the opposite direction of the arrow? So like that's the direction away from the forests that they're usually grazing?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we have a gate on that side too, of the smaller, yeah, like there, because that would take them out.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Maria is here. Says hi, working remotely today, so could take part. So good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Maria. Nice to have you. All right. Okay. We have our little map here. And then the other thing that I would recommend that also often gets skipped is to make thumbnail scribbles. So it's very tempting to just go in and be like, where's the script? To be like, okay, she gets up, turns around, and sees the goblin, and it's very tempting to be like, okay, so she's kind of here looking around, and there's the goblin. And be like, okay, boom, I'm done. I've done my scene here. What I would suggest to do instead is for almost every panel, do a couple of scribbles of how it could be. Usually, it will bleed like a moment will bleed into many different camera angles and many different moments, and you might use multiple of these thumbnails that you come up with. So you're not just doing a thumbnail for this one moment, but kind of like also find ideas for any moment that's around this one. So in this case would be okay. Yeah, she's turning around, which kind of means she is leaned away at first, doing something else. You just pluck the turnip from a very resistant sheep, and and then we can start asking ourselves the question, like, do we already see? That's also always the thing about a reveal. They're kind of like three different things that you can do. You can what is it? You can show something before the audience knows about it. You can show something, or it's about the character and the audience being on the same knowledge or not. So
right. So number one would be you reveal to the audience before the character knows about it, which is kind of this first thumbnail where she wouldn't see the goblin first. And then the second thing would be to reveal it at the same time. So both the character and the audience both know about it. And then the third thing would be the character sees it, then we kind of pan over, and then the audience gets the reveal where they didn't beforehand. So yeah. Those are I think that's what you're going with, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are always the things that we could play around with. So in this one, we've already shown the goblin before Mila sees him, but we could also be like, okay, Mila is still just getting the turnip, about to turn around, and then we see it at the same time. Or it could also be she already turned around and it's like, oh my god, what is going on there? Then that would be the last one.
Well, full disclosure, in my head, when I saw the scene, it was the last one. I think she could have a great reaction shot, like a close-up reaction shot, and then we maybe even truck out quickly and see the goblin like, oh, and like he got caught almost. But that was just me. That was what was in my head.
Interesting. For me, it was the middle one. It was at the same time.
Okay.
So she turns around, and at the same time, we we pan over. But both things are worth exploring and worth testing. And also, it can come down to time, like showing her reaction first and then going to the goblin and the goblin reacting to that is almost like you're doubling time, because you're showing her moment first and then you show the goblin reacting to it, which in reality might happen at the same time. Like she turns around and in that moment the goblin would immediately go back already. So sometimes it come down to like, I want to speed it up a little bit or I want to slow it down a little bit. And for slowing down, showing the reaction of the character first, then showing another character with their reaction is a way to make it a little bit slower, but also more explicit, more like you read her emotion, you read his emotion. Yeah.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but it's absolutely true. And I think that we're technically, even though this is the beginning for us, we're technically coming out of a bit more of a slow moment, right? So we have the option of either. If we were in the action scene, you probably don't want to slow things down yet. But because we're in between almost, we have that wiggle room where we could do either. So do you want to thumbnail out both ideas and then we'll see which one maybe works?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I could even because I have my iPad here, I could just play around with the one idea and we can have dueling concepts at the same time. So let me I'll start sketching some thoughts too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So she was talking to that other sheep. That was. So the first one that we do are probably very symbolistic. Like, we have the sheep at one side. The sheep at one side. Here we have her just having plucked the turnip and like talking to the sheep, being like, "Why are you so stubborn? Why?" I think she says like, "Why are you my dad's favorite?" And so this one is really like, this is just the symbol of what is happening here. Like, you see here on the left side, that's where she is. On the right side, that's where the sheep is. And like, there's no realistic, like, it feels like it's on a stage. It doesn't feel like it's cinematic or anything like that at all. And I want to push it more towards being cinematic. So let's think about what that could be. And one thing that's always good to make your, especially 2D projects, because in 2D you need to come up with that to construct a 3D space for it. So one of my favorite ways to put in more a feeling of three-dimensionality is to put down this like very crude, very rough grid here. Let's actually make our brush a little bit see-through so we can kind of work out the details. And this will make it immediately easier to place stuff in a three-dimensional space. So we could have like, the sheep being here on one of these tiles of this 3D floor. And she was on the ground. Just getting up because the sheep dragged her over until the turnip came loose, and she might still be on the ground as she's talking to the sheep. So this is kind of still very stagey. They're still just next to each other. So we could think about having the sheep being like very much in front. Let's do a little plane again. And have the sheep kind of like edge of the scene, complaining. And she's on the ground, kneeling. Okay, so if she's right-handed, she will have the turnip in this hand. And then we can have her gesture at the sheep, and maybe the sheep is going out. So in this one, we're very far away from her, so we will probably have a shot that is just cutting closer. And for that, so the what you shouldn't do, or most of the time you don't want to do that, is to just zoom in. We could make this this close-up of her just having zoomed in, just seeing her from the exact same angle. Usually you want a difference of at least 25 to 30 degrees from the camera position. So you could show her face fully frontal, and this would really set it up for having a change. Like, she's looking more into that direction, but her head is not tilted in that direction anymore. For this other direction that she's going to talk towards. Maybe we can. I think this is too close because we can't see the turnip anymore. So, yeah, this is too close. We could also think about the 3D space in this one. Maybe the camera is actually looking down on her, which makes sense because, she fell into the mud. She was down on the ground. The sheep kind of won. So I think it could be interesting to have the perspective grid. Maybe this is a bit extreme, but let's try it. So here, this is where her knees would be. And there she looks into that direction. Now this is too far away, I think. But yeah, I kind of like looking at her from above in this case. And you could also do it from if you have a close-up of her face, we could bring this quality into it as well by really thinking about, okay, where would the top of her head be? And maybe instead of drawing a circle, a sphere for her head, we might want to draw a cube, because that makes it more clear where the top of her head is. And then we would have something like this. And here we would have now all this hair. Like, we're very likely to forget about how much hair a person actually has.
True.
If we don't force our brain to do that. So it would be kind of like this. All right.
So I definitely like that dimensional quality. I have a very flat version, which I'll share my screen real quick, and you could see my super flat version. But this was just I was roughing it out as fast as I could. Okay. There we go. Okay, so in this super quick rough version that I did, again, we have a very flat look to it, which I think I like your idea better. So maybe we could tweak it. I mean, if we want to go with something like this, but in this, this is where she's complaining about to the sheep, and we kind of have that close up of both of them and the sheep with its just silly little eyes looking. And then that's when she turns, and then she gets her reaction. So we have our nice reaction shot, and then maybe the sheep kind of looks over too, and then we would have a quick pan out and see, and then she starts yelling at the goblin, and the goblin then turns and looks over and gives his pithy remark. So that was just what popped into my head while you were drawing yours. Another idea, and I think that's really useful to have. This is one of the nice things about working together on something like this is you can bounce ideas back and forth. But I definitely like your concept of having that 3-dimensional quality and seeing her, like from that particular camera angle.
Yeah. I like that you have the goblin turned away from her. In my head, the goblin was already, I didn't get to that scene yet, but in my head, I was always thinking about, so if we go into that frame where we reveal turning around, maybe looking to the side, like this, and seeing the goblin, I always thought like he was already facing her, but you're right. He also has like the strategy, like if I can't see her, she can't see me.
In my head, it was more like the dad is the dangerous one, right? Like he doesn't even really think much of her. So he's not like super concerned about being sneaky almost. He's like, oh, there's that little one. Who cares? And then he's just going about what he was going to do anyway. Especially if we do have a sheepdog. The sheepdog's also not there. There's no danger for him. Like, what's she going to do? And that kind of puts her into that position of lacking power, which is one of our themes, right? And so to have him so dismissive that he's not even caring that she's there. And then when she sees him and yells at him, well, if we go back to the script, isn't his reaction basically like, who cares? Like, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So we don't need him to be nervous about it or anything. Like he's like brazen about it, and he's just going to do what he does and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe he's even surprised that she's like trying to stop him at all. Like, what are you? What? Little girl.
Right. What are you gonna do? I don't know what his, because I would imagine she's not supposed to be doing magic anyway, so it's not like he would know that she had something to go after him with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, there's some people asking about storyboard thumbnails for storyboard. Do you want to do a recap of what we're doing, so that the people who just joined the stream?
Yeah, you bet. So Dylan asked us that storyboard. So right now, what we're doing is we're kind of doing just some quick thumbnails that will eventually develop into a storyboard and an animatic. And this way, by working the way Ferdinand is right now, in the very rough and loose way that we've been playing around with here, you don't get so bogged down by the details. You just want to shoot for clarity. And then you can try a bunch of stuff. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And just through what he's done so far, we've both gotten an idea of, oh, this wouldn't work for X number of reasons. Or this works well, and that's a really good focal point that we want to do. So having this sort of thumbnails is really, really helpful. It's definitely something that you want to think about when you're working on an animation. And as Ferdinand mentioned earlier, unfortunately, sometimes even as professionals, we skip this part because we're either so enamored with the idea that we just want to jump into the storyboard, or we're like, I see it pretty clear in my head. We'll just go with that. So it's really helpful to do this thumbnail step. Highly mentioned, this kind of like making me think of a newspaper comic. Yeah, I would agree. This sort of just separate frames that tell the story, it definitely has more of that sort of comic style feel. And if you can tell it beautifully in these sort of images, then you have a pretty good idea when you get to the animation stage. It's going to either work well or you'll have at least a good foundation to work with. So this is a really important step. And definitely if you're working on an animation, do not skip this. I think we have an old Animator Island article actually about thumbnailing and how crucially important it is. So definitely worth checking that out and doing this sort of thing.
Indeed,
and this is, I mean, we're working on a piece of a short essentially, and it's still this important. So if you were working on something like a full film or a whole series or something, this early story or this early thumbnail stage is just so crucial. Can't stress that enough.
Yeah, definitely.
Maria,
the software we're using is OpenTunes, by the way. I just wanted to mention it again for people who
good call.
No.
Maria says, legend has it that Alfred Hitchcock had such meticulous storyboards that his crew could shoot the entire movie exactly as he envisioned. I think that's fair, because if you have somebody who really plans it out that well, it's almost like the hard work is now done and you get to the enjoyable part of putting it together. A lot of your creative decisions are going to be in this stage, and then you can always tweak things. You can change stuff, but if you can work things out early on in this way, then you're in really good shape.
Just had a crazy idea. Seeing this one, how she's holding up the turnip, we could cut close to her so that like it's barely at the frame, at the edge of the frame, and then the goblin could take the turnip out of her hand.
Oh, it's even more insult to injury. I like it. Hiley says, so is the plot mostly the girl trying to catch the sheep? So the whole short, if we want to look at it that way, would include her essentially wrestling with the sheep initially to get the turnips off. The sheep is just belligerent, and it's hard to get these turnips. She finally gets it off, but she kind of falls to the dirt in the mud kind of thing, and she's just like, it's so annoying. And then we move into the part that we're actually working on right now, which is going to be the focus for right now, and that we can always add on the beginning and the end. But during this focal point, we have this interaction with a goblin that has come into this part of the farm to start stealing turnips in the middle of the day, while she's supposed to be doing the harvest work. And so I believe, according to the script, the goblin is going to jump onto the sheep and then start essentially riding it away and stealing the whole sheep instead of just the turnips. And then she'll have to deal with that situation. And so she's going to toss off her gloves and try and do some magic that will stop this goblin. That doesn't necessarily go according to plan, but in the end, she at least will rescue the sheep. The goblin will get away with, I think it's just one turnip. It might be two. I'm not sure. So he goes off to see another day, but she does rescue the sheep. And I'm not sure where in there we have the ending of our particular shot, but that's kind of the whole thing. If that makes sense. Again, if you're interested in Ferdinand reading the whole script, definitely look at the description of the recording of this video once it's up at Animator Island TV, because he goes through the whole script and you'll get a good idea of exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, I think the goblin could just take the turnip. Oh my god. Let me see if that works. I was also thinking, like, where is it that they put the turnips in? Because if it is like a wheelbarrow, it would make sense to just steal the wheelbarrow, which we don't want to happen.
Right.
So I wonder if it could just be these big crates that neither of them could lift.
That makes sense.
like maybe they get them like with an ox or something to bring them to wherever they need to go.
Or, I mean, it's getting too complicated, but let me just throw it out there for kicks anyway. You could have
Yeah.
the wheelbarrow, and then as he starts pushing it, the wheels would fall off, and then he's just like, uh-oh.
Okay, so maybe he was already on his way out with the wheelbarrow.
I don't know, but that's just an option. Like if we need to take, because the wheelbarrow makes sense much more than the crate from a farming perspective, but we do need to stop him from using the wheelbarrow. And the easiest way to do that is if a wheel falls off, because I've actually used a wheelbarrow where that happened, and it's awful because it just falls over. And then you could even have the turnips fall out or something, and then she's like trying to chase him, and that's when he jumps on the sheep. The question is, have I added too much difficulty to what work?
It could also just be a pile on the ground. Like maybe the
That's
wheelbarrow is wherever they bring the turnips already. She doesn't have them yet, or her dad just brought a stack of turnips away, pile of turnips away. So the wheelbarrow isn't there, and she just collected them on the ground, which could also be like, the reason why it's not that many. Maybe it's like just a small pile.
Right.
Okay.
I guess the challenge with the pile is it would be harder to work with the really funny, let me grab that one turnip you're holding, because there's a pile there for him to work with. So in that sense, it would almost be better for the wheelbarrow, because then he's like greedy because he wants that last one. He has all the other ones already, and then he's greedy. So he wants that last one, and he's going to start pushing it away, and that's when it falls off. The wheel falls off, and he's just like, dang it, or whatever it is.
I do like how the speed reads though in this one. So we have this moment where they look at each other and there's just like this small pause, and she's like, hey, don't, that's not yours. And then the goblin says, this private property is just an arbitrary social construct. Bye. This kind of joke, which has like its spotlight moment. And I feel like I just like this timing of then he jumps on the sheep and mayhem starts. Much better than I'm going with my wheelbarrow. It falls off. What do I do? I jump on a sheep.
I agree. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we may have to, for now, lose him plucking the thing out of her hands, just because that's going to make it harder for all the rest of it. But let's not forget that idea, because it could be really fun for some future event.
All right. Okay, so you could continue doing thumbnails for a really long time, but we're gonna leave it at that for now. And I think I want to try, because that kind of also popped up like 3 times, this kind of camera angle in a little bit bigger, just to see how it feels. So this one is going to be our thumbnail and notes layer. We're going to keep that thumbnail and notes. And I always kind of like to work with a set of like 4 layers. I guess we can already create them. Vector level, vector level, vector level, and another one. And I like to already assign them roles. So the bottommost one will be our background. The next one will be, let's just call them A and B. They're usually characters, but they could also be objects. And then we have the foreground. And I always forget about cool foreground elements. I feel like that can add so much depth to your scene if you have something where it's just like, and then here a couple leaves are coming in from a tree,
Right.
stuff like that. And with the foreground layer there, I force myself to always like, oh yeah, I should maybe put something in the foreground. Um,
I think that was one of the things that I thought of with that pan out from the reaction of Mila. It gave you that element of foreground because the you're in the same shot. You're not cutting away. Not saying we have to use it, but that was kind of what was in my head there, where we could have that depth and kind of show the distance between them, that kind of thing.
mhm.
Anyway, while you're setting that up, HMT says I did storyboards. By the time the animation started, I would have been better off with a few more shots. Process continues. By the end, I didn't realize my original idea anymore. That certainly can happen. One of the trickiest things about animation is how long it takes, right? And so if you're not continually going back to what is the point here? What am I trying to say? What is the story? Then very quickly things can balloon, like the wheelbarrow incident, right? Like that's like we got some. It was such fun that we're like, oh, we'll just keep going. But eventually you have to be like, oh, wait, hang on. That wasn't what we were trying to accomplish. So let's step back and get back to where we were, which I think is one of the reasons having a solid animatic is so useful, right? Because it does help ground you into what you were originally intending without being like, oh, let's add this extra thing. And it's fun, but no, you gotta, what's the old saying? Kill your darlings. You might have some great idea, but put it on the back burner because you have a very specific point you're trying to make for this scene or whatever.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about how, just roughly, how that whole thing could work out. Maybe we do need the now, like I have it like a bean shape this way, but maybe the bean shape should be more in that direction. So we have like a long stretch towards the gate. So that run is a little bit longer. So I think that would be kind of good.
One other thing. So at some point we have them run up the wall or whatever, right?
Yeah.
If we go back to script. So we need to kind of plan the route. I don't know if you want to do either a dotted line or something just to see where it would kind of end up. But I would also say this, because this is one of something that I wanted to mention earlier. One of the other nice things about animation is you could cheat a little bit, right? So don't get so hung up on your map that you can't play around a little bit. Like you can't break it entirely because people will notice. But if a character is running for a little while and having a dialogue at the same time, that's when you can compress time a little bit and you can get away with some things, which you'll note in a lot of animation. If you go watch some like chase scene, one that always pops into my head is The Simpsons. There is this episode of The Simpsons, and I'm going to digress for a second because I think this is a interesting thing to think about. There's an episode where they get a racehorse, and Homer and Bart, I think, are on the horse getting chased by jockeys, and they're running along, or they're galloping along down the street, and the houses are just flying by. And they cut to Flanders in his yard. And he says, need any help, Homer? And Homer says, no, thanks, we're cool. And then all of a sudden, I think it's Marge and Lisa jump out with hoses and spray the jockeys from the neighboring yard. But if you look at the actual timing, by the time that conversation is happening with Flanders right next door, they would be like a block away, technically. So they just kind of ignore that distance for a second. And it works because it's, part of the gag. But it always stuck in my head at the same time because I feel like it pushed it a little far there. But that's something to keep in mind, right? So, like, he might not, timing wise, actually get as far as he would if that was the case. but it's okay because we can kind of fudge some things a little bit. You just have to be careful you don't fudge it too much.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good example. I think I know what scene you're speaking of. That's, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense because literally Flanders would be next to where Marge jumps out, but they have a conversation in the meantime.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, Lou says, "Hey guys, I'm newish to storyboarding and find it hard to understand what a sequence is. Can you offer a quick description? Also, thanks for sharing your process. Really appreciate it." Sequence. That's a good question. So, Ferdinand, maybe you'll be able to speak to this a little more. In my experience, sometimes people use terms kind of fast and loose. So what is a sequence for one person may be different than another. Same with like a scene for one person or one film or short might feel different than what somebody else calls a scene or a shot or things like that. For me, a sequence would be one whole idea almost. So like in this instance, it might be the sequence of Mila chasing the goblin and the goblin riding on the sheep. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ferdinand? The definition of sequence?
Yeah. So I think the very textbook definition is that you need to have also just production wise to think about different chunks of your project. There's like shots that are from one cut to another cut, and there are multiple of these shots form a scene, which usually takes place at the same location. Not always, of course, you can cut back and forth at different locations, stuff like that. But generally, scene is like a collection of shots in the same location. And then a sequence would be a situation that is told by multiple scenes. Usually, a sequence has an arc. So it would set up a question or a conflict, and it would have like a kind of it would intensify, and there would be some kind of solution, and um, maybe a sequence is like this point where you feel like, okay, this point has been resolved, or a new point has been made, and usually that is the point where we cut to a completely new location and different characters, and the point where you would feel comfortable to pause the movie to go to pee, for example. So yeah, and this also makes a lot of sense for a production, because sometimes you want to group scenes also production wise, because it might be castle from the inside and castle outside because they're going outside in that sequence. So they would kind of be developed together and have the same look development and stuff like that. Whereas if you when you jump into a completely new sequence, that could be a completely new area, a completely new part of the movie. So yeah, I think that's what sequence means in my head, but
that's fair. No,
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So I think what happened was I was thinking of sequence in terms of the artistic shots almost. And then you were talking about which you're right, is more of the definition, dictionary definition of sequence, which is the overall story and the production aspect of a sequence. So it's got a little bit of both. So I think if I can make one suggestion, then talk to your coworkers so that everybody's on the same page. Make sure that you're all talking about the same thing if you're talking about sequences, which is one of the nice things of having like that kind of open development where you could be like, when you said that, did you really mean that or did you mean this other thing? So it's good to know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Maria mentions that, going back to what we were saying before, as long as the core stays the same, elements can change. And the same thing happens in reworking a script. And then during rehearsals, too, things change. So if you're doing something more live action or a play or anything like that, when you have a rehearsal, sometimes, somebody will bring something to the table that you didn't think about before. And so it's important to be flexible in that way, too. You just, as Maria said, don't want to lose that core element. The thing that you're really trying to say should stay the same, because if it's not supporting that story, or if it's not supporting that core message, it's probably better to lose it, because you don't want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to get lost in the weeds. Sorry, I got distracted by Ferdinand's drawings.
So the thing with storyboards is also that you can focus on different, it can be very overwhelming to do a storyboard, because you might be trying too much at once, which I'm realizing I'm kind of doing right now. I already thought about the 3D camera space. I'm trying to come up with a good pose. I'm trying to think, like, how does the entire scene develop? One thing I didn't talk about yet, which is going on in my head the entire time, is like the screen directions. There was already, I think, someone made the suggestion to put arrows into the map, which makes a lot of sense. So I was in the back of my head already thinking about screen direction, and maybe Sir Snuffles, the main sheep, is going into that direction first, out of the picture of Mila, but then he kind of has to come back for the goblin to jump onto him. So I was already thinking about like all these things at once, and that can be good. Like I like how we were thinking about, wait, what would be realistic? How would this farming setup be? And I'm very happy that we did that, because I think it makes the scene more tangible. But you could also rightfully don't think about all this stuff at once, and be like, okay, I just want to do I just want the story to come across, and I don't think about camera angles yet. That would be a valid first draft for your storyboard. It shouldn't be the end, because if you never think about camera angles and is your camera higher or lower, then your animation will look kind of flat in the end. But you also don't need to overwhelm yourself. If you can't think about all these things at once, and who can? I'm certainly taking more than I can chew here. So it's totally okay to be like, okay, I'm just doing whatever now for this first pass, knowing that there will be a second pass. There has to be a second pass, because that's the core of writing. That's the core of storyboarding. Writing is rewriting, and the same applies to storyboards.
For sure. So much of what we do is redoing, as Ferdinand just said, like across the board. Never be afraid to do that. And that's again another really nice thing about working rough, is you don't feel so bad when you have to scrap something and start over, because sometimes you just want to polish and polish and polish, and then you're like, oh, I got to get rid of all that. If Ferdinand had rendered out a wheelbarrow, we might have been more married to the idea, just because it's like, look how much work he already put into the wheelbarrow. But because it was just like, we're done. You don't have to. I was like, okay, that idea can go away. It's okay. So that's a good point. You're going to have to redo a lot. So you might as well keep it rough and loose.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate how much detail Ferdinand's going into. If I was doing my first rough at a storyboard, there would just be like a line for her body. Because I'd be like, whatever, it's fine. But it's good to work a little bit of both ways, because you don't want to leave it totally up to chance, but you just don't want to get lost in it.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing is we're also still developing her character design. So I hope that, maybe this will inform the character design process a little bit as well. At this point, she would actually still be wearing her gloves, which was a thing that we talked about in another live stream. So let's put the gloves on her.
Hailey asks, I guess it depends on who you want to communicate for. Not sure I exactly know what you mean by that. I don't know if you could clarify, or Ferdinand, do you know what that might mean? Apologies.
Maybe.
We were talking about a couple different things. So, do you mean like the clarity that you're shooting for? Because if you're communicating almost for yourself, then you could go shorthand on everything. But if you're trying to show an animatic to the rest of your team, for example, you would probably need a lot more clarity because then they'd be squinting and be like, what is that line? Be like, well, clearly that's the goblin. Obviously. Yeah, that's okay. Some clarification. If you're making them for yourself, you can be looser. If you need to communicate with the team, you need to be a lot more detailed. And that is absolutely true. You definitely need that aspect. Mm-hmm. So obviously here, if I wasn't sitting here at the same time and walking through this with Ferdinand and he showed me this, I would know exactly what he's talking about. Whereas if you've looked at some of the scribbles that I've been making over here on my iPad, it would be like, what is happening here? The other interesting thing for me is that I find I use words a lot more, even in my storyboards, which is probably not the best thing in the world. But I think as a writer, it's one of my other things that I do. I tend to think in words a lot. So I'll write down like little notes on the storyboard itself or on thumbnails, especially, which isn't necessarily the best thing because you're not going to have those words in the end, but it keeps me focused. It reminds me of what I'm trying to do. So I think that helps. Lou says, have you guys established the character designs yet, or does that happen after storyboards? It's kind of an ongoing process. We mentioned that a little bit before. We don't have the character design nailed down yet, but we have some inklings. We've pulled some ideas together and said, you know what, this is going to be in there. She's going to have this kind of curly, fluffy hair. We know that element. So when Ferdinand adds it here, we don't have to think later, oh, we'll have to change that so it's very straight hair. That's like part of their character that we're going to go with. We talked about how we want her to have these kind of bulky farm clothes because they're not only hand-me-downs, but also they represent that sort of life compared to the maybe more magical stuff that she's also interested in. So that aspect we can just kind of put into a storyboard because it can change, but it's not going to change dramatically. And I think it would be fair to say we've kind of landed on a certain amount of character proportion for this character. Ferdinand, would you agree with that? Like, she's probably not going to become suddenly tall and lanky. She's also not going to suddenly become super short and truncated. So in that regard, we can proceed with storyboards while we're still developing the final character look. It might help to have the final character, but also at the same time, it might not. Because as Ferdinand said just a few minutes ago, this may lend itself to our pursuit of what her final character design looks like. If we're working on storyboards and we think, oh, well, we didn't think of this one thing, then we can go back and add it to the character design without having to redesign the whole character and stuff like that. So I think typically the character is still being a little bit designed during storyboard phase, but you have the base elements down at least. You might not have the final models and the turnarounds and things, but you probably got at least a clear start. Hailey says, I've noticed that TV storyboards are way cleaner than movie storyboards where the animation is in-house. That's interesting. I guess I never really paid attention to that, but I think it might have to do a little bit with that aspect of knowing the final character design, right? Because in film, you're probably still working back and forth. But in TV, it's almost like you need the character design to be done already because there's so many other moving parts that if you don't have that character design, it's probably going to be trickier. But I don't know. That's a good question.
All right, so I did one where I wanted to show a little bit of the sky because I think it will make for a good reveal when she's kind of like still kind of in the process of getting up. Then the goblin would be above her. I mean, the goblin is also not the tallest, and although he does have pretty long legs.
Yeah, he's more lanky, so
So
it would probably be wise at some point. I mean, it's probably not that time yet, but we could put her next to the goblin, do some like little character, height things just to get an idea of because we'll want to probably push the shape design so that she's either closer to the same feel or a completely different feel, depending on how we want to go. But that might be a good thing to do just so that we can get an idea of their height differences and stuff like that. But we're still probably a ways off on that.
Mm-hmm.
MD asks, can I art with a mouse? Which we often get in our live streams. People often ask this question. So let's tackle it again. You can, if you're comfortable doing art with a mouse, by all means, go for it. There are some people who can do beautiful things with the mouse. For me, it's just a struggle, and you're like, you're fighting the tool that you're using, which is why I always I would always recommend something like a tablet, even if it's a very inexpensive one. I feel like you get better results personally. But if all you have is a mouse, you keep doing what you're doing because it's better to still create, even if you don't have maybe the tools of Walt Disney Studios or whatever.
Yeah, there's some people there were some people on Newgrounds that were doing like whole animated series with the mouse.
Yeah.
Some very amazing animation stuff. But it was also back in the day where like Wacom was the only manufacturer of tablets. And those days are long over. Like you can get like a XP pen or a Huion tablet. I'm using a Huion tablet myself, a Dial 2 right now, which is not the cheapest one that they have. I think this is already $100. But they do have some for like $50 or something like this, which if you are really drawing a lot and this already is your hobby, $50, if you put that in perspective, that can just be a couple of notebooks and a couple of good drawing tools anyway. So I think sooner or later, if you're really into digital art or animation and you want to really explore that, those $50 are well spent for a tool that is that important.
For sure. And you can also now, a lot of places have refurbished stuff. That's how I was able to get my iPad Pro, because there was no way that I was going to go out and spend the amount of money a normal iPad Pro cost. It's just too much for me right now. But refurbished and a couple generations older still works like a dream. Still love it dearly, but it was way cheaper. So that's another place that you can look to if you're trying to stretch that budget. Just make sure they have a return policy wherever you're ordering it from, just in case. Never hurts.
Good point.
Maria has some comments about the creation of characters and how a lot of them develop as you're putting them into practice, essentially. And so that's some really good points there in the chat. That's just things can come about while you're working that you would never have considered before. And that's a really nice aspect to keep in mind. You can always change stuff. You can always tweak things until you release it, in which case, don't go back and try and redo it at that point. Move on. It could be very tempting. Be like, I could do this better. No, just go do something else better, or do the sequel, or whatever it is. You don't have to redo the same thing the rest of your life.
All right.
Well, as Ferdinand's finishing up that shot, I think we've got a couple different options here that we're going to mull over and figure out. I know that probably both of us will have to end the live stream before too long. Got some other engagements to go on with, but I think this is, as he's flipping through these, you can see this idea of, okay, what do we want to go for? What's working, what's not working, that sort of thing. And I feel like that gives you a solid start of the process. Now, in the interim, before the next time we do this, we're probably going to be continuing to work on Mila's character design. We're probably going to continue to be doing some storyboards, some more thumbnails. We're going to come up with some new ideas. So the next time you see this, it may be that we have some totally different concepts to go with and stuff. But this gives you that idea of where we're starting from and what we're looking at. And hopefully it was useful for you guys and helps you in your storyboarding and your character creation and all that stuff. But yeah, this is just kind of how it works. And then you just keep at it, keep going, and see how it goes. Keep the good, toss some good because it doesn't work, and then definitely toss the stuff that totally doesn't work. But I hope that was useful. Ferdinand, do you have anything that you wanted to add before we kind of wrap up, or do you want to keep going? Because I know I kind of have to split in a bit, but if you want to keep going, you're more than welcome.
I think I'm gonna keep going at least another half hour or so.
Oh, okay. So there you go. I will leave you guys to it, and you guys can hang out with Ferdinand. But I did want to mention before I go that the next live stream that I'll be doing in Pursuit of Style, as we're calling it now, I guess, it will be Monday, this coming Monday, which is, let me pull up the calendar because I don't even know the date. Monday, the 20th of March, 2023. And I will be doing that at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Now, we're currently in the weird part of the time zones where things have changed. So we're in Eastern Daylight Time here in the U.S. Ferdinand is over in not quite daylight time yet, I think, or wherever it is. So we're off for like 2 weeks or so. So check your time zone. Check the current Eastern time. It will be 10 a.m. Eastern time, and I'll be doing a live stream. I believe the subject is going to be related to creating story in illustration and in art, and talking about interesting concepts and playing around with that aspect of things. So we're going to dive into some of the cerebral stuff that you need to think about while you're creating art so that it interests your audience, so that it draws them in. It's not just necessarily pretty pictures, though you want it to be pretty as well. But hopefully that will be interesting for other folks, and I will see you over there. And Ferdinand, thank you as always for hanging out and doing this stuff together. It's great. I'm just really enjoying it. I'm glad we get to do this again, and we're chugging along.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for hanging out. I'm always looking into forward to doing this again. So yeah, always happy to have you. And yeah, we're gonna keep going a little bit for these people who want to stay. And
stick around. He will keep an eye on the chat too. Apologize, I'm gonna ditch you guys, but we'll see you next time, and I'll see you next time, Ferdinand. We'll see everybody later.
Bye.
Right, good luck. Bye.
Hey. All right. Yeah, so I at least wanted to crack that little moment of her turning around and looking up. I kind of really like this pose, so we're going to copy it and see what else we can do with it. So I kind of do like explaining, because this is going to be if we animate this, we're gonna jump right into it. So I figured we should at least see the sheep with the turnips, and get a little bit of an explanation what's going on. If this is going to be a little standalone animation, we kind of need to see the sheep just scurrying away. Also this should... I want to delete this one. Oh, it's not possible to delete this one. And just let's switch it to 160. There we go. So we see some of the turnips and some of the leaves on top, so people have at least a small chance to understand that the turnip came from the sheep here. Let's fix her eyes so we can see a little bit closer. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean, MD Bulbul. How can I move the screen like a movie scene in animation? Do you mean like 3-dimensionally have like the camera fly through the scene? Or what camera motion do you mean? What screen motion? Can you give an example maybe? So that would be good to know. Let's see if we see what we did. Hilly had a good point earlier that the stuff that we have so far kind of looks like the same scene from different angles. It doesn't seem to be different moments in time. Totally, it could be the same moment from different angles, which I like. I like this little bit of realism and like physicality that we have here so far, because it's going to be a chase scene. They're going to bust through the fence, and there will be, some physical action from the side of the goblin and the sheep. So I like this groundedness in a certain physicality. So I like that we are exploring this from different angles. But, I think this one might be the one that I want to go with for now. So we can establish what this is a little bit, where the turnip came from. And then go closer. Come closer to her face while she turns, then have her reaction. I think we're gonna try what JK suggested, that we have the reveal during after she turned. Let's see. So MD Bulbul means with the camera scene, the motion slowly coming closer to my character. Like the camera is slowly coming closer to anything I animate. There are a couple different ways of doing that in software. So usually for something like this, one thing that you probably don't want if you just want a slight zoom in, but that's always a possibility. Like if we have like, a person from really far away and we have like a camera motion of actually getting closer, then you would draw frame by frame how the camera comes closer. And maybe while you do that, you would also change the camera angle. And that would give you this very three-dimensional, very living kind of camera motion. But most of the time, this is a lot of work, a lot of a lot of frame by frame animation for a complex camera motion. So what you do most of the time in animation is you have like a character being here a little further on the screen, and then you would have a camera layer, and in OpenToonz you have a camera layer by default, and then you can go in and animate the camera, and there's actually a camera mode where you can see what that would mean. So we would set a keyframe. Oops, this is we'd set a keyframe and then go closer to it. And what's going on? How is this so difficult? What is going on with this camera navigation? Okay. And then OpenToonz would do this because, this is keyframe animation. It would move the camera between the two keyframes that we just set. And many other animation software, they have keyframing for exactly that purpose. You could also animate the layer, like group all the layers that you want to zoom in together and then animate how the group gets bigger. If your animation software doesn't have a camera, you just animate the layers getting bigger. In terms of storyboarding, which is what Hilly says, maybe MD is asking about how to storyboard a moving shot. I would make it very easy and simple by being like, okay, this is my storyboard, and I want to zoom in, and I would just indicate this like this with arrows. Like during the storyboard phase, this is enough, and then in the animatic phase, I would remove that layer. And in my video editing software, which is something that we're going to look at later, how do we turn this into an animatic, into something that actually feels like a film? I would remove that note layer, and then just in Adobe Premiere, in my video editing software, I would zoom in and maybe even keyframe it. If it's an animatic, I would animate that zoom in, just to have it for the purpose of the animatic and seeing how it will feel. Getting a little preview. Yeah, exactly. Arrows showing the direction. And there you could also establish like different arrows for if you have like an element in the scene moving, you might want to have like these 3D-ish arrows so you can really tell that he's coming towards the camera. And then maybe you would, for camera motions, you would have a different type of arrow. You would just have these line arrows to make clear, okay, this one arrow is the camera motion, this other one is the character. This one is not readable at all. Like, I definitely would not recommend doing that. All right, so look at where we are here. Yeah, the pear does look like a rock. Hello, Infinite Imagination. So yeah, this is just to be clear, this is a turnip that you plucked. Now it looks like a heart, which I think is even more disturbing. Like, having like these. Oh no! But I think hopefully color is gonna make that clear. Like, they might not even be white. Maybe they red, like little more like radishes or something like that. So it's really clear that this is from the sheep. But that will be something that we can tackle later. Yeah, you're welcome, MD. I'm happy to help. Okay, so I have this one that we start with. And this would be kind of, let's correct the eyes. I kind of do not, looking forward in 3D space is always difficult. The eyes should always touch the eyelid, either at the top or at the bottom. Otherwise, you get like these very, intense stares. That's like maybe something for villain characters, or certain like very I'm so angry moments. Actually, it might work here, but usually you're gonna have the pupils touching the top of the eyes, the eyelid. Um, um, hmm. Yeah. Agent T was imagining the movie in their head as I was reading it out. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, that's the thing, we try to get it out of the head into the trying to get it out of the head into something that is visual, something that can be used as a base for discussion and decisions, to be like, yeah, we want to go in that direction, more of that, less of that. So that's going to be an important tool to move forward and to get this project anywhere. I love these sheep eyes, these pupils. Okay, so let's see where we are in the script right now. So she's saying, "Why are you my dad's favorite?" And then I think I want her to turn around in the middle of the sentence. So let's think about what we're gonna do next. We're gonna cut closer to her. Maybe we make clear that she's talking to the side. Maybe she's like, just coming up here. Still kind of like so she's still bent over. Her arm is out from pushing herself up, and she's looking in the direction of the sheep. And maybe let's do the arm later once we know what her actual direction is. So maybe it's a profile. And that's the other thing, if in some cases she has her hair in front of the eyes, that could be potentially problematic when we show her from the side where she has the hair covering her eyes. I do like the kind of sideways profile shot here. And there's her scarf. And it's gonna be like this here. All right. And maybe she's like brushing off some dirt while she's getting up, or maybe her hand is still down. Her hand should probably still be down, pushing herself up. I do like the change in angle. Do you feel that? I love that. I love that feeling when you cut closer, and it has like this feeling of dimensionality to it, because of a change in angle. you feel more like that there's a 3D space there. Okay, her hair. Her hair is going to be so interesting if we define it closer. I did this one drawing of her the other day. I gotta pull it up. And you know, I'm now doing something that I probably shouldn't do, but since I do want to make an animatic out of this fairly early, I think I'm gonna go in between the two drawings that I just did. And I'm just gonna make a drawing between the two, actually using onion skin for this one, and have her come up. Which, these are drawings that you might get a bit disappointed if you have to throw them away later, because they were not needed to communicate the rough ideas of your story. But I know that I'm gonna do an animatic with this version already, because I'm just an animatic person. I like to go into animatics as early as possible. So I will kind of already add little animation frames like this. Okay, this doesn't make sense with her arm being down there. You can see how this is already taking more time than I should probably spend on this. But kinda, I think I really will like the effect of her getting up. And, it's kind of like cutting during motion. And, I could do a similar thing here. I could copy this frame. Was it Shift D, Alt D? Control Shift D? How do I get that same drawing? I was just gonna... Oh, I keep switching my layers. Not doing that consistently. Okay, so this one. And we're gonna modify this one to be the sheep getting away. So we're gonna have... We have a little bit of motion in here that we can play around later. So sheep is exiting. She's getting up. And then she's turning. This is still a variation of this one. So let's have her look to the other direction now. Maybe straight to the camera, or almost straight to the camera. You don't ever want to go like super straight to the camera unless you have like a reason to do that, like a fourth wall break. But now we can see her reaction nice and clear. And be like, hey, what's going on there? Hi, Candy Corn. Hi, Mickey. Maybe that's also a moment where her arm drops now. So she was kind of turning around, getting herself dusted off. And now she's like, oh, what's going on here? Okay, maybe a little bit smaller. Let's see. So, Turnip Sheep is running away. She's like, I can't understand why you're my father's favorite, you stubborn. What's going on there? So, okay. I think she's still too big here. Let's... And just because I like this kind of stuff, I like spending time doing that. Let's do a little. Oh yeah, Alt D was making a new empty frame. So let's have her turn around and have a nice little breakdown frame for her turnaround. Again, this is also just an animatic flavor thing. You don't need to do that at this time. At this point, I'm just doing this because it's fun for me, and I like doing this kind of stuff. That's what I'm doing animatics for. But if you're just doing your first storyboards or your very first draft of your story, don't worry about it. Putting these little breakdowns and in betweens in. So let's just see. Okay, sheep's running away. She's like, why are you my dad's favorite sheep, you stubborn? What's going on there? And then we have the reveal of what she's seeing, which could be, how could it be? Let's see what we did for the thumbnails. Hello, Mickey from Ukraine. Nice to have you here. Haley says, feels almost like putting in-betweens in the storyboard. Yeah, you know, you don't need to do that at all. It's just it just gives me so much enjoyment once I gonna do the first animatic version. I'm always happy about having drawings like this to put in. It might be a bit too early at this point in the story, in the process. So I kind of already like this one very much. This concept of the goblin being facing away and collecting stuff from the pile, and her just being like, "Oh, what are you doing there?" That's gonna be super nice. So of course I did all these layers wrong. Let's put her on. This is creating a new brush stroke. I don't know. Okay, so not very clean with my layers here. Apologies. Bye, Maria. Okay, so let's have, maybe start with the background. We're gonna have, so, the horizon is always, if it is on eye level of the character, the camera is at the same height. So by doing something like this, and the goblin is maybe also on eye level, then the horizon in the distance would be on their eye level. If we're looking up, the horizon would be lower. If we're looking down, the horizon would be higher. Mickey, this is a bit vector level. I prefer working in vector because you can do things like, okay, I don't like how big his head is, and it's much cleaner to pick out just that brush stroke. So I can just take it and change it. Okay, so the horizon would be on eye level if the camera is on eye level as well. That doesn't mean that this is the actual end of the room. For example, if we have the fence being very much closer than the end of the horizon, then we can't see the actual horizon. The line that we have here is just where the fence is. So that is a thing to consider. I think I want to do I think I want to look up. So I want to put the horizon a little bit lower, which would kind of give us the sky as an point of interest in the scene, like this. And the actual line of where the fence is probably something like here. And we do have a pile of turnips. And maybe that goblin is far too small. But let's try it. Let's see how it works. Animator asks, I came to ask if OpenToonz has something called an onion, like Flipperclip has. Yes, OpenToonz has onion skinning. Let me show you real quick. Yeah, Hilly also confirms. Let me bring up my screen tools here. Here, down there, these are the onion skin tools. So you can double click on it to activate it, or if you've never used it before, it's probably going to look like this. It just has the baubles, this playhead bauble, and if you click on anything on the right side, it's gonna make the previous layers visible, and if you click on anything on the left, it's gonna make the future drawings visible, as you can see in red and green. And there's also there are two rows for the onion skin. There's the lower one, which is traveling with the cursor, and there's the upper one where you can just pin a drawing. If you say okay, this is an important drawing for me, I always want to see that in the onion skin, then this stays activated even if you move the cursor around. And if you want to get rid of it quickly, you can just double click that thing, and it will switch onion skin on and off. That's how that works. Screen is blurry for me. You can also, in the YouTube player at the bottom where the option wheel is, you can change the resolution, and you can watch the recording of this live stream. Maybe that's going to show up in a better quality for you. Okay, so we have the goblin taking maybe he's like on this side of the pile. And he is getting lots of turnips, as much as he can carry. And her hair, she's like here. Well, so her right arm, her right hand would be here holding the turnip. And here she would be in a surprised kind of fashion. Let's see, maybe let's move it a little bit down so we can see more. Hi, animator. Okay. Again, this is only a first draft, so I probably want to refine that. Actually, I think all I need is to zoom in. Okay, so maybe we need to talk a little bit about screen direction. Which oh yeah, I like this. Okay, so turnip sheep is running away. She has the one turnip. It's like, you sheep, you. What's going on there? And maybe we see him like just putting lots of turnips to take. I'm really realizing that I'm completely ignoring layers now. So it would be like whoop, whoop, whoop. Taking the turnips and maybe it will be better to read if we just have a line there. Okay, that's good enough. Mickey asks, how many years have you been animating? Let's see. So I was kind of doing animation for fun a long time ago. Let's make it like this. Even before I started studying it, I was making little animations for fun. And when I started studying animation at the Film Academy Baden-Württemberg, that was in 2009 when I went to the Film Academy. And then in 2015, I got my diploma at the Film Academy. And now it's 2023. So, like professionally, I've been doing it for like 8 years. Well, actually, even before, while I was still studying it, I was already doing projects for companies and stuff like that. So I don't know, between 10 to 12 years, I've been doing animation commercially as a job. So yeah, for a little while now. Okay. Yeah, screen direction I wanted to talk about. So there are complex and easy ways to think about screen direction. One of the most important things is that you don't want to change the axis of your scene too much. We actually have one change of axis in here, but usually, if you have character A and B, um, and they are talking to each other, then let's say we have the camera here, then this will have character A in the foreground, very close, and character B in the background, further away, and they're talking to each other. And you can do like a reverse shot thing where you put the camera here, and then you will have character B in the over the shoulder kind of perspective, and you will have character A here. But they will still be on the same side of the scene. Character B will always be at the right, and character A will always be at the left. Yeah, Hilly, the 180-degree rule. That's right. In German, it's called like axis jump. If you jump over the axis. In English, you usually refer to it as the 180-degree rule, which means that in 180 radius around this line, you are allowed to put the camera without confusing the audience. If you put the camera here, then B will be on the left and A will be on the right. So you don't even need to think about the axis or degrees or anything like that. You just need to keep in mind after certain for a certain part of your animation, you want to keep it that way. You want to keep character A always on the left and character B always on the right. So if we do something like that right now with the goblin here, now we are establishing something. Namely that the goblin is on the left, Mila is on the right, and the sheep is even further right because we just saw it. We just saw it run to the right. And this we kind of need to respect, which was why earlier I was already mentioning, like, how is the goblin going to jump on this sheep, on this one? How is he going to end up jumping on the same exact sheep? Because in our screen direction right now, the sheep is very far right, Mila is in the middle, and the goblin is to the left. And this is kind of something that we want to respect. Exactly, Hilly. Hilly says breaking the 180-degree rule is really disorienting to the audience, which can sometimes work if that's the intention. Exactly. So in our case, we're kind of already like breaking it a little bit. Like we're leaving one axis for another. We had the axis Mila and the sheep. Mila is on the left. Sheep is on the right. And then we jump over that axis to open up the second axis, which is Mila is on the right and the goblin is on the left. And we then kind of need to respect that. RIP asks, why don't you use Blender Grease Pencil for 2D animation? Oh, Gray, thank you for subscribing. Welcome. The thing is, I'm still very new to the Blender Grease Pencil, so I still have to learn the ins and outs of it, and I kind of already I want to learn the ins and outs of it, especially when it comes to drawing in 3D space. Like I think the big advantage of the Blender Grease Pencil is that you're not limited to a 2D screen. So I really want to look into this. And actually, I think this project could actually end up being animated in the Blender Grease Pencil. We're just not there yet. I need to research the tool a little bit more, need to do more drawings. And for the live stream, it's not that fun if you see me be like, oh, where's this in Blender? Oh no, now I broke something and I don't know how to fix it. Like, I know maybe that could be entertaining. But and sometimes wonderful people in the live stream do help me when I explore functions and software that I don't know that much. But for today, I wanted to focus on the storyboarding theory and stuff like that, and actually get some storyboard drawings done, which is why I decided to stay in OpenToons, which is also the software that you can find a lot of tutorials on this channel. So this is why for now I'm doing that. Yeah. So no, I do not speak Icelandic. I'm German. I can speak German, but yeah. Let's see. What else do we have? MD asks, how can I give a real sunshade into the character's body? Like, you do want to color them and have shade at one side of the character? Is that correct? Is that what you're trying to do? Just trying to understand your questions. Yeah, lots of questions. Indeed. An effect. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, I actually did never get an OpenToons project that far where I wanted to have shading in OpenToons. But what you generally do, like from the idea of it, I mean, there are different ways to do it and different types of layers to do shadows with. Let's maybe I can show that in Photoshop. Let's see. Photoshop. While I'm setting that up, just a second. My wife is over here. I'm going to mute my mic for a second to talk to her. All right, so let's just open something. Just do something. So you would have the layer where you have your character on, and maybe on a separate layer you have the fillings. There are many different ways of doing that. How do they always hide the paint bucket now in Photoshop? Where is this? I don't recognize my Photoshop anymore. What are you doing? K or F? I don't know. Many people in Photoshop also just brush the color in, like they actually paint the color. And let's say you have oh, Photoshop, you're really failing me today as a means to really quickly show something. Let's say we have like blue cloth or something like that, and just really roughly painting that in, and then we want to put shade on one side of it. There are different ways to do that. A digital painter, they would probably go in and paint the shadow in, and blend the two colors together and stuff like that. But in animation, what you usually do is so you have a shadow layer where you have a shadow layer uh, where you would draw the shadow on. And what I like to do very often is just have that solid black. There are also tricks on where you can make it that you can only draw within a layer. Like you can use the already existing stuff as a mask. But I'm not going to do this right now. I'm just going to do a very, very rough shadow. And if you have a lot of animation, you're not going to do like a soft shadow or something like that. You're just going to have this very harsh shadow layer. Actually, I did not draw it on a different layer, which I should, because I want to show you something. So OpenToonz has this as well, where you can do this on a different layer, and you can have the fill layer that you filled the color in as a mask. I'm going to make a tutorial about this eventually, but this is the principle that you have in a lot of animation software. Is you will have a character layer or a fill layer where all your colors on, and then you will have that shadow layer, and then you would set that shadow layer to a different kind of color processing. Like multiply is something that is done very often for shadows, and then you can just pull down the opacity. Of course, you can also do colored shadows. Like let's try. So if we have like a cold material, it sometimes makes sense to do like a very warm shadow, something like this. And you can see how this shadow is not completely black. It's tinting it in a warmer color, and then you can play with that opacity around. And so multiply blending is probably what you're looking for. And then for highlights, you would have like a separate highlight layer. And the same thing is, if we have warm shadows, we probably have cold highlights. So I'm going to go for like a blue highlight. And this one I'm going to use not multiply, but overlay to make it glow a lot. And this way I can do my highlight and shadow layers. And you could find this concept in many different software. Blending layers or something, that's also something that OpenToonz can do as well. Yeah, Mickey, drawing with the polyline is totally valid thing to do. Yeah. So, by the way, if you like the way how I and JK talk about animation and you want to interact with us even more, first of all, you can support us on Patreon, on patreon.com/animatorisland. And every cent that you donate there goes towards us being able to make more content, make more live streams, and is highly appreciated. So that's on patreon.com/animatorisland. And another thing we have there is the mentoring sessions. If you join in the higher tier, in the group mentoring tier on Patreon, you get access to a monthly group mentoring session where you can show whatever you want us to critique. You could show us an animation, a character design, a story idea, and we would give you our tips and tricks for it. It's usually me doing the mentorings at the moment. I will give you my input, my feedback. If it's drawings or animation, I'm going to draw over it and help you to improve it, help you to improve your skills in general. And that is the group mentoring on patreon.com/animatorisland. If you're interested in getting more personal feedback about your projects, that's an excellent way to get in touch and also help us to do more content, and also work on this little film, which is hopefully something that we will keep doing the entire year, that is now coming up. So yeah, that's that. Let's jump back in. Yeah, the church bells were also this little plug was presented by the church bells, church right across the street. Love the church bell ringing in the background. Miss Europe, says Louis. Yes, indeed. This church, at least where we're living right now, is only ringing like that. Um, I think in the morning at 7 a.m. and in the evening at 6 p.m. It rings for like, what time is it? 6 minutes. And the place where we lived before, the church bells would ring every hour. But then for like every 15 minutes, it would like ring once. It just a singular bell bong for every 15 minutes. So, at 15 after it would be one ring. At 30 it would be 2. At 45 it would be 3. And then at the full hour it would ring a little bit longer. And it was kind of annoying sometimes. But yeah, I like the flair of it. I like it too. Yeah, so we have the goblin. The goblin could also like keep doing it, like look at her and be like, "Oh my god, I've been found," and like just continue to take turnips. I think that could be really cool. Let's go over all of it again. So I liked doing that to get back into the mood. So she's on the ground. The sheep is running away. She gets up, curses at the sheep, and it's like, oh, what is going on there? So sure about the screen direction, the angle no more. Oh, I like that. That's good. And then we see this. Maybe we cut to her immediately. I don't know. This is something that we could try later. So what the actual order of things will be. So he should stay. Now, there's the danger now. We cut closer to him. Now, it's very dangerous to just put him like this, because then he would be on the right, which would be wrong. He needs to stay at the left to keep the screen direction. What we talked about, the 180-degree rule. And also, we might want to change the angle a little bit, so we can actually see what he's doing. So JK already made some scribbles of the goblin where he's like a little bit more bug-like. I think I would love to keep that, and but still, have like these goblin ears, maybe like this, and maybe hunched over, having like almost like a beetle-like physicality. And I still want to try him. I still want to have him a goblin with multiple arms, but I think that's just just gonna be too much work to do it like that. So I don't know. Let's try it with just 2 arms for now. Okay, and Mila is kind of standing there. Being like, what? What are you doing? And her right hand is here now. Guess she's still holding her turnip. Lots of turnip holding in this one. And then what's always good is to like flip back and forth to see what is happening here. So okay, we're not doing posing really, but I do like to have some variation in how the legs are posed. All right. So this feels kind of good. Maybe we do a variation of it. And this is the cool thing about vectors now. I can just go in and like rotate this. During a final project, final animation, I would never ever do this. But, just to get a point across really quickly, this kind of cheat is really nice. Okay. And then we have her yelling at him. Let's see what's in the script. Hey, don't, that's not yours. So and I feel like, because she's such an introvert, this is probably cost some kind of energy for her to like, yell at him like that. So maybe she has like the eyes closed and it's like, hey, don't do that. Like, she's kind of like pressing this out of herself. She's not like the most outgoing person. But the family business is on the line. MD says, "You're my teacher now. I love how you explain things." Yeah, thank you. That is my goal here with this YouTube channel, to educate and teach. So I hope that you can find lots of useful stuff here. So I don't know what exactly she would be doing now. Maybe she's just, is she pointing at him? Like, hey, like, I think it needs to be kind of awkward. Like maybe she still has the arms going up like that. Okay, so Goblin's taking stuff. She's like, don't do that. That's not yours. And the Goblin turns around and says, private property is just an arbitrary social construct. Bye. So maybe he's just slowly turning around. Let's see what he's turning around to. Sometimes that's easier to go from where you end up in. That's true for storyboarding and for animation. So let's think what we want to end up in. He doesn't even fully turn. Maybe it does have a little basket or something that he's putting them in. Trying to have a clear silhouette here. I didn't want the arm overlapping with the turnip. So I'm keeping that separate. Does he have a tail? We were thinking about him having a cape, like that would be his thing. That, you know, this particular goblin, he likes wearing his cape. And I think it would also help with his like insect-like kind of style. And then we have a modification of this one. I think he does need a bag though. Like, so if he brought a sack to put the turnips in, it feels a little bit more like he planned this whole thing. So maybe there is a sack here for now. It's already kind of full. And that's one he can just grab. Or not. I like how later in the episode, Mila has like a spell where she's like pulling the turnip from under his arm. So I don't know. Or maybe he has like a little belt with pockets that are already full. I don't know. That's something maybe for later. Right now, let's turn on onion skin and do that little. A little speech. Private property is just a social construct anyway. Okay. So maybe he turned around when he said that. Azur says she could pull the turnip from a hole in the bottom of the sack. Yeah, that would be a nice to kind of pull these two concepts together of her pulling the turnip close to her, but still having a sack, which is easier to animate. Also, then, keeping track of 4 turnips or so under his arms. So I think it doesn't make any sense that Sir Snuffles the sheep is next to him. I like the idea of just jumping and then being on the sheep. That could be fun. MD asked, "Did you watch Puss in Boots?" Yes, I did, and I liked it a lot. Really awesome movie. Very cleanly told. Very nice. Very nice animation. Liked it for lots of different reasons. I can really recommend everyone to watch Puss in Boots 2. Really, really good movie. Okay, I'm realizing how my my throat is getting a little sore, so I guess I'm gonna wrap it up soon. So if you have any last minute questions, let me know, and we maybe I can answer one before I have to go. What's going on here? Just getting rid of that one. Okay. So I think this is turning out quite nicely. Okay, she got the turnip. Let's put that next to it. If we can. All right. So Sir Snuffles is running away. Wah! Mila says, "Why are you my dad's favorite? You stubborn little..." Huh? Hey, don't! That's not yours. Private property is just an arbitrary social construct. And then in the next one, he would already be jumping on the sheep. So yeah, that's a nice little chunk that we did there. I think with all this theory that we talked about while we were doing it, I'm quite happy that we got a couple drawings done, and I really liked starting with like the map here. I think that's going to help a lot during the action sequence. So yeah, I think we are very well prepared to continue this project, continue this little scene, and I'm always happy to do that live and have some more awesome conversations with all of you. But for now, for today, that's it. Yeah, thank you, Hilly. I like it too. Turned out very nice. Sometimes doing that live is a little bit risky because you don't know how it's gonna end up. Is this actually going to be something? Um, yeah, but thank you all so very much for chatting. I had a really good time with all of you. Just once again, if you want to support me, check out patreon.com/animator island, and we have the group mentoring there too if you want feedback from me on any of your animation or projects or stories, character designs, whatever you're doing. That's an excellent way to get in touch with me and support the channel at the same time. Yeah, so yeah, great hanging out with you too, Louis. Always looking forward to doing it again. And yeah, thank you all and have a nice day. Bye bye.